Dempster Highway is the only public highway in North America that crosses the Arctic Circle. It is 737 kilometers of all-weather road that begins in the Yukon and winds its way through majestic mountains and vast tundra to the Mackenzie Delta of the Northwest Territories. Canada's Arctic, the land of the midnight sun, welcomes you at the end of the road. The Dempster Highway is your access to the Arctic.
Welcome to SUAANGAN. I'm your host, Marjorie Bates. You probably heard that the Dempster Highway is getting some major restoration and upgrading. It's also celebrating its 25th year. So we decided this would be a great time to have another look at the highway that has become a part of our lives here in the north. Let's join Janine Blake as she takes her trip down the Dempster Highway.
When Prime Minister John Diefenbaker called it a road to resources, the Dempster Highway took on mythical proportions before it was even built. His political opponents, though, had different views.
Indeed, they had one aphorism that was used, namely, that I intended to build roads and railroads from igloo to igloo.
That was in 1958, and construction began the next summer. Then the Dempster Highway construction ended in 1964. But it began again in 1970 because of renewed oil and gas exploration and development. To haul supplies further north, cat trains were used. Some buildings still remain along the highway at Chapman Lake. The Dempster Highway had gone through many phases of construction, and the road to resources was finally completed in 1978. The Dempster Highway follows the route used in the first 2 decades of the 20th century by the Northwest Mounted Police, when they patrolled by dog team between Aklavik, Northwest Territories, and Dawson City, Yukon. The highway was named after Corporal Jack Dempster, the Mountie who led the most patrols along the route. Corporal Dempster was made famous by a rescue patrol that garnered him a northern legend. Inspector Frank Fitzgerald's patrol, with 3 dog teams and 4 men, had started south from Fort McPherson, NWT, at the end of December in 1910. They traveled through extremely cold weather and midwinter darkness. They became lost. In February of 1911, Corporal Dempster was sent from Dawson to search for the lost patrol, who was a month overdue. It took Dempster 3 weeks to find the men, who perished less than 35 miles from where they began their journey. The lost patrol is buried in Fort McPherson, and a memorial site was erected in their honor. The Dempster Highway starts just off the Klondike Highway at the Klondike Corner. 41 kilometers up from the corner is Dawson City. This is where the Yukon River and the Klondike River meet. Dawson City is famous for the gold rush that began in 1896. This small community swelled to approximately 30,000 as people came here to find their fortune in gold. Dawson City capitalized on their unique history and became a tourist town after the death of the gold rush. In 1950, the locals dressed in clothing reminiscent of the 1890s and greeted tourists who arrived by steamships. Reconstructed by Parks Canada in the 1960s, the Palace Grand Theatre is home to the Gaslight Follies. The Arctic Brotherhood Hall, now known as Diamond Tooth Gertie's, is where the casino nights were moved. Following the North Klondike River is where the Dempster Highway starts its long journey to Inuvik. the southern Ogilvie Mountains at the foot of the Tombstone Range is where the North Klondike River has its source. The Dempster follows this river valley to tree lines and starts a sharp descent to the North Fork Pass on the Continental Divide. Because of the extreme cold temperatures across the northern hemisphere, during the ice ages when the rest of Canada lay under a heavy blanket of ice, the mountains along the Dempster remain largely free from glaciation. The highway crosses the Continental Divide 3 times. The divide separates the Pacific and the Arctic draining systems. Weather systems for the two oceans often collide along the divide in the summertime, and snow sometimes falls at a higher altitude. Normally, though, the Pacific system dominates. I hope that you've brought your fishing gear, as there are many creeks and rivers along the Dempster Highway that are great for fishing. We're here at the Dempster Interpretive Center at the Tombstone Mountain Recreation Park. To get an excellent view of the Tombstone Range, go to the viewpoint that's just above the campground. After leaving Tombstone, look for moose along the river valley. And scan the mountains for white shapes that move slowly. These are Dall's sheep. The uneven edge of the mountains provides safety for animals that are feeding. Dwarfed willows and birch line the highway and give way to tundra. Permafrost is widespread and continues in this area. At this point, we're still over 600 kilometers from the end of the Dempster. As you are driving, keep a lookout overhead for airplanes. You'll notice that the highway widens at certain points, making it an emergency airstrip in some sections.
The Dempster Highway. Some may think that is just 736 miles of plain gravel road. But for those of us who travel it regularly, there is a lot of sights we look forward to seeing. And we'll share that with you when we return. Welcome back to SUAANGAN and our trip down the Dempster Highway. Our next stop, Eagle Plains.
You may see moose feeding on weeds and willows in Moose Lake. This is also a great site for spotting waterfowl. Just across the road from Moose Lake is Mount Vines. Mount Vines is named after a bush pilot named Lionel Vines that flew regularly to Chapman Lake long before the road was built. This gave the mountain its name. The locals refer to it as Pilot's Peak. Windy Pass has many plants, and the area is covered by lichen. As you make your stops along the highway, listen to the silence. The only sounds you'll hear are the relaxing sounds of the creeks, rivers, and wildlife. William Ogilvie was a prominent Canadian land surveyor who worked in the Yukon in the 1800s. This river is named after him. Two great campgrounds to stop over and take a rest are the Rock River Campground and the Engineer Creek Campground. Across the river from the campground, you'll see Sapper Hill. The rock face of the hill resembles a castle. It was given its name in 1971 in honor of the 3rd Royal Canadian Engineers who built the Ogilvie River Bridge. Why, you ask? Well, Sapper was the nickname for an army engineer. At kilometer 259, stop at the Ogilvie Peel viewpoint. Pull out your cameras because the panorama view from this spot is incredible. Even the novice photographer can bring home photos that look like postcards. Just point and shoot, and your pictures will look like a pro's. We're here at Eagle Plains, Yukon, population 8. We're halfway on our trip up the Dempster. If you'd like to stop here, they have a hotel, restaurant, lounge, and gas bar. And don't forget to stop in and pick up your Arctic Circle crossing certificate. As you're in getting your certificate signed, stop and take a look at the many old photographs that line the walls. Throughout the hotel, you'll notice photos that relate to the story of the Mad Trapper of Rat River. Here's one of the many versions of the Mad Trapper story. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police traveled to Albert Johnson's cabin with a search warrant. As they lay in wait outside the cabin, Johnson shot one of the RCMP. A posse was formed with over 40 dogs, 25 men, and 1 aircraft piloted by Wat May. For 48 days and over 150 miles, the posse were unable to capture Johnson until they cornered him and shot him on the Eagle River. Albert Johnson, the Mad Trapper of Rat River, is buried in a clavic. The Arctic Circle is an imaginary line. The people who live past here welcome you to the land of the midnight sun. There are many tourists who come to the north each year to witness the summer solstice. When we were traveling down the Dempster Highway, we ran into some of the porcupine caribou herd. The herd, which is 200,000 strong, winter in the Ogilvie Mountains. They summer in the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, where they calve and raise their young before migrating south to the Ogilvies again. The Inuvialuit and Gwich'in depend on caribou meat as a staple for their diet.
When we return, our next stop on the Dempster Highway is the small town of Fort McPherson. Welcome back to SUAANGAN and our trip down the Dempster Highway.
Midway Lake is on the Peel Plateau at kilometer 44 on the NWT side of the Dempster Highway. It's the site of the Midway Lake Music Festival, which has been held annually since 1985. The music festival attracts country musicians and lots of local talent. There is always traditional dances, jigging, and square dancing. Anyone is welcome to join the jigging and square dancing, so grab your partner and kick up your heels. Make sure that you have refreshments, though, as the dances can go on late into the evening. The Yukon-NWT border is at kilometer 465 of the Dempster Highway, but the kilometer markings start at 0 again on the NWT side. We're now 269 kilometers away from Inuvik, but our next stop is Fort McPherson. You will have to cross 2 ferries to get to Inuvik. The first is on the Peel River, and the second is on the Mackenzie River. Both ferries are free of charge. During breakup in the spring and freeze-up in the fall, the ferries are closed. So there are approximately 2 months a year that there is no road access to Fort McPherson, Sigachig, and Inuvik. Supplies and produce can get quite expensive as they have to be flown in during these times. The Mackenzie River is the largest river in Canada. It has long been used for transporting goods. Years ago, residents would wait in anticipation for the arrival of their barge orders. The Mackenzie River has long been used to transport goods. We're here in Fort McPherson, Northwest Territories, the home of the Tuktoyaktuk people, and during our stop here today, we'll visit the burial site of the Lost Patrol. In memory of the Dawson Patrol who lost their lives February 1911, this memorial site was erected by their comrades. Inspector Fitzgerald, Constable Kinney, Constable Taylor, and Special Constable Carter are buried here in Fort McPherson. Inuvik's people and origins began in Aklavik when government officials believed that Aklavik was slowly sinking into the delta. Fortunately for Aklavik, that was not true. Inuvik is situated on the bank of the east channel of the Mackenzie River and is a fully modern town with a population around 3,200 and growing. Since its early days, Inuvik has had a mix of many ethnic cultures, but the main group of people included the Gwich'in and the Inuvialuit. Inuvik plays host to many cultural gatherings each year. When the tourist season begins, this reinforces the values and respect we place on our people's traditional knowledge, as well as getting rid of some stereotypes, so outsiders may understand who we are as Aboriginals. We have maintained our existence by living from the land and waters around the delta, but with land claims that have been settled, the Gwich'in and Inuvialuit have become bigger players in the development and economics of Inuvik.
And our government question is not at all dealing with the mass of boards we have on Inuvik.
Inuvik has plenty of attractions to offer any visitor who flies or drives up the Dempster, whether it's to see the scenery that is unique, or meet the people of this friendly place. From the end of May, 24 hours of sunshine is a warm welcome from a cold winter when the sun does not rise for 30 days. Today, Inuvik is still a hub of government activity and is progressing with the influx of people who want to take advantage of the jobs available because of future prospects for oil and gas in this region. From Inuvik, Tuk is just a short plane ride away. It's a community that is located at the south edge of the Beaufort Sea. This hamlet of over 1,000 people, most of which are Inuvialuit, was a port for trading and shipping for many years during the height of the fur industry. This place was well chosen because of its natural harbor for schooners and ships. The Inuvialuit still live off the land and sea by fishing, hunting, and whaling. Even with all things modern, the tradition of their ancestors are still maintained and passed down. Tuk has seen many changes from the first dew line station to the major oil boom of the 70s. Many elders who were influential in establishing the present community have now passed on, but they will always be remembered because of the strong traditions related to the respect of our elders. At present, there is little oil and gas activity around Tuk, and the dew line station is now unmanned and computerized. Now small business and tourism are the major employers, as well as some local artists and carvers are making names for themselves around the world. Tuk is well known for the pingos that surround the countryside. These ice core hills may be as high as 150 feet and are permanent features of this beautiful landscape. While in Tuk, there are many things to do and try. Licensed outfitters and tour guides will take you on an unforgettable trip of your choice.
This looked very interesting, and this is as far as we could go on our trip. We're going to do the toe dip in the ocean, I guess. Not the swim, the dip.
I tell them to come and take the trip and enjoy the scenery. It's beautiful.
The Dempster is your access to the Arctic. Everything along your travels will seem huge. Our mountains, valleys, tundra and rivers will change your definitions of vast and immense. Once you end your Dempster journey in Inuvik, you can take your pick of tours to the communities. Visit the Mad Trapper's grave, dip your toe in the Arctic Ocean, see the pingos, and then come back to Inuvik and by the evening be sipping a latte at the Internet Cafe. We also hope that the journey itself along the Dempster Highway was one that you'll never forget, and that you'll be compelled to visit us again here in the Mackenzie Delta, the land of the midnight sun.
The Dempster Highway became the only highway that crossed the Arctic Circle, and almost a half a century later, it's still the only highway that holds this title. This ends our road trip down the Dempster Highway and also SUAANGAN. I'm your host, Marjorie Bates.